few weeks ago, I spoke about envy, and we looked at the complex problem of really wanting what someone else has got, or perhaps making them want what you've got. Today, I'm going to look at the other side of the coin and something that is frequently confused with envy, and that is jealousy. If envy is about I want what you've got, then jealousy is about I think you want what I've got. I think you want what I've got. Not quite the same as you want what I've got. And of course it's jealousy that causes so much negative emotion in people. So today we're going to talk about a little bit about what causes jealousy and what it really is, and more importantly, how to handle it, how to handle yourself, and hopefully how to let go of it and live a better life. To start, let's define jealousy. Essentially, a limited definition of jealousy, if you like, is the feeling of anxiety, insecurity, sometimes even anger that follows when you perceive a threat to an important relationship. That relationship could be a lover, it could be a sibling, a friend, a child, but it involves an important relationship. When we perceive that threat, we feel insecure about the status of the relationship, and therefore we feel insecure about ourselves and what is it about ourselves that makes the other person interested in us. What is true of jealousy, therefore, is that it always involves three people. Unlike envy, which is about me and you, jealousy is about me, what is mine, and you. And so it's a little bit of a triangular relationship. So there's a partner, a perceived rival, and when we are looking at jealousy, what's important to understand about it is that that rival is perceived as a threat. We fear losing something to a rival, a real rival, sometimes an imagined rival. So the third party in jealousy doesn't even have to be a real person, but the feelings are very real. Those feelings are generally characterized by anger, even rage, with a big dose of humiliation and even sometimes shame thrown in. There's a great deal of irrationality in jealousy. It's famously been called the green-eyed monster because it turns a person into a monster. It pushes people so far beyond rational behavior that they can sometimes seem monstrous. And unfortunately for the person experiencing it, those feelings can escalate the whole problem itself. Jealousy is often wrapped up with shame, and some of that shame is about the feelings that we have. Even if the threat is real, we can feel shame at being so affected by the threat or experiencing the jealousy itself. So jealousy is a mixture of what's real and what's not real, and it's a mixture of some very key emotional triggers in us and perhaps past emotional experience that causes us to react that way. Psychologists tell us that we mustn't simply characterize jealousy, though, as monstrous, as this negative emotion, because it undoubtedly serves an evolutionary function. It's not an emotion that we should suppress, but sometimes it's trying to tell us to pay attention. Maybe it's a wake-up call that a relationship is in danger or something is going wrong in a relationship. Sometimes it's a wake-up call that says you need to take certain steps to regain that relationship or regain that person's regard of you. And so in some senses it's a necessary emotion because it helps maintain and preserve emotions and might even motivate people to do things which help their relationships or which address relationship matters. To me, it does sound a little bit like in an ideal world those things would be true, because jealousy's emotions of anger and rage often overwhelm us in some way. Be that all as it may, as much as jealousy can perform important social functions, it tends to be more destructive to relationships than constructive. Certainly, even if it is or has some positive connotation to relationship, the important thing is that jealousy is not born out of love. Even though it's in a relationship and even though it's about your partner or your sibling or your whatever it may be, it is not an experience or an emotion or an action born out of love. It is born out of fear. Fear of loss, often connected to low self-esteem and poor emotional stability, often described as neurotic behavior, but not being able to maintain mood and stability easily can make one very sensitive and can lead to jealousy as well. Basically, insecurity is the source there, and in relationships itself, possessiveness, dependence on the other person, fear of being abandoned by the other person, and feelings of inadequacy, fear of how they really see you. Those are powerful things. Possessiveness, dependence, inadequacy, abandonment. It's no wonder people get so irrational and so out of control. You don't have to be emotionally unstable. Those are sensitive buttons, and get a few of them pressed, even the strongest of us is at heart a human being who seeks and responds to love. And if enough signals go off saying you're losing that love, someone else is trying to take it from you, you will be abandoned, you are not good enough to hold it, it's not surprising that it can lead to the results that it does. The main cause for the feelings of jealousy are feelings of low self-esteem or lack of self-confidence. Because you imagine you're not capable of certain things, or you're not good enough in certain ways, you might not be attractive enough, you might not have the right skills required, there's something about you that isn't good enough. Those are the root of jealousy, because if you did believe that you were good enough and you were self-contained in that way, there's very little someone else could do that could make you experience a feeling of low self-worth. So obviously, that's the main cause of jealousy, that there's some belief in you, even if it's a hidden, secret insecurity, that in some way you're not good enough. And that often is related to a poor self-image, a poor kind of version of ourselves. The things that we believe about ourselves strongly affect our behavior, as well as how we perceive other people behaving towards us. So for example, if you believe that you're not attractive, firstly, you might not approach someone you think is attractive. You also might believe that they're not looking at you when someone is making eyes at you and wanting to flirt from across the room. You shut down and you don't imagine that that's related to you. Furthermore, you will perceive other people as thinking of you as unattractive. For example, he looked away because he thinks I'm unattractive. It's you that thinks you're unattractive. How would you know what someone else thinks? So we project that out into the world. And it can get even worse when you meet someone who is attractive, because then that starts off the feeling of, I'm not good enough. I'm not as good as that person. That person's better than me. So that brings out feelings of jealousy. Well, that could start as envy. I wish I was as good looking as them. But in a relationship, that can often provoke the fear that if you believe that you're unattractive, because that other person is attractive, they're going to get my partner. And the root cause of that whole jealous triangle, which has just been set up, is your belief in your own unattractiveness. It's not love, it's not something your partner did, and it's not something the third party did. It's you. We've also seen it many times, but fear is the source of so much of our negative experience, as well as our negative self-behavior, our talking to ourselves. So much of what we don't do, or so much of what we think is happening as a negative experience, is based on fear. The main fear in jealousy is not just that the other person wants your loved one, but that you will lose their love, you will end up without them, or you will end up alone. And out of that fear of being alone or being rejected, jealousy is born, and we then project a whole lot of beliefs onto the third party of how they are trying to take our partner away, because we're not likely to blame ourselves for being alone. It can only be I was fine until that person came along. I was loved until that person came along. If you're really lovable, then it doesn't really change when someone else comes along. Lovable is lovable. And of course, the most fundamental emotion underneath all of this is insecurity. Insecurity is because you have a poor self-image or poor self-confidence, makes us feel insecure about ourselves and insecure about our relationships. In many ways, jealousy is related to insecurity about relationships. In order to eliminate those feelings of insecurity and low self-esteem, we don't have to fundamentally change ourselves, and we can't fundamentally change ourselves. We know that. We try that all the time, and we know we are who we are. Our job is really to master ourselves. So the first step in changing insecurity and fear is to change our belief in that false image of ourselves. And it's often said, well, how do you change a belief? You stop believing it, which might sound hard, but it's much harder to believe something than to not believe something. Because to believe something, you have to persuade yourself out of a bunch of evidence which is often not tangible or real. So belief requires us to sustain a truth based on lack of evidence. That's belief. So if you believe certain things about yourself, you acknowledge, I don't really have evidence for that. They're feelings, they're past experiences, it's not based on evidence. So I just better not believe it. And with a little bit of practice, you can find yourself giving a lot less energy to fake beliefs, because there's not very much to sustain them. We do need to learn the skill of changing a belief. You're not automatically going to switch it off. So you do have to practice the skill. And practicing the techniques I'm talking about today, about mastering the feelings of jealousy, sure, requires practice. But again, is a lot easier than giving energy to something which is imaginary and can't in any way resolve, which is so often what jealousy is related to. So stop believing the story in your mind. When you hear that story in your mind, say, well, it's a belief. It's not based on any facts. And, well, that is the nature of beliefs. The thing to really watch out for is judging yourself, because judging yourself amplifies insecurity, which amplifies jealousy. And jealousy fuels bad behavior. We can start becoming obsessively monitoring the other person and monitoring their Facebook and their relationships with other people. And ultimately, it can even spur things like violent behavior or extreme irrational behavior. I mean, you've seen the movie, just name it. There's countless of them where extreme jealousy leads to extreme behavior, usually in a romantic relationship. Most of us would never go to those extremes, but there's certainly a lesson in jealousy's capacity to fuel damaging behavior. Many negative emotions fuel damaging behavior. Most of that damaging behavior is directed at ourselves, which is not good. Jealousy has the additional problem of leading to damaging behavior which can be directed at other people, not only the spouse, but even more worryingly, the stranger, who may even not have anything to do with this. Because remember, jealousy is often a perceived threat from a person, not a real threat. So it can cause extremely destructive behavior to a person who's completely innocent. So what steps can we take to try and master those feelings? Certainly, the Stoics even give us some tips which can help that. Firstly, you need to appreciate that you have power over your thoughts. Your thoughts about other people, your thoughts about nature and your life in it, but most importantly, thoughtfulness, how you handle other people, how you decide to respond to other people. Recognize that you have a lot of control over your thoughts, and then realize that that is a characteristic to respect. That control over your thoughts protects your mind from false perceptions. That first step helps you understand the likelihood that jealousy is a false perception. So it's recognizing, actually, I'm in charge of my thoughts. I'm not just going to get into a reaction mode. Marcus Aurelius says, concentrate every minute, focus on what you're doing, be in the present, and handle everything you're doing carefully, seriously, willingly, fairly. And the same goes for other people. Handle them carefully, tenderly, fairly, with love. Concentrate on your thoughts so that you begin to understand, I'm in control of how I respond to this person. I'm in control of how I deal with the situation. And by concentrating, you can free yourself of all the other nonsense that tends to feed in. The things that you imagine, the things that you let your emotions run away with you, and focus on what is real, what is actually in front of me. And remember this, even if someone else has thoughts about your partner, the core idea that nothing that goes on in anyone else's mind can hurt you, nor can the changes and the shifts and all the stuff happening in the world around you harm you. What harms you is how you respond to those things. The Stoics tell us that is where harm lies. The world is harmless. How we react to it is harmful. Stop reacting that way and everything will be fine. I'm sure you can think of some scary examples of a harmful world, but the point really is how we respond to something is where the harm actually lies, because that's the part that affects we ourselves. So psychologists suggest we should firstly admit to our feelings of jealousy, the emotions in the jealousy, the fear of loss and all of those kind of things, and realize that this isn't about how someone else feels about me or feels about my partner. This is about me. It's about my insecurities, it's about my fears, it's about my self-worth. And the good news is, those are things I have access to. I can fix, unlike somebody else's mind. So start there by asserting that with yourself, sitting quietly and realizing that's what I can do. And if your partner is the jealous one, in reassuring them. Robert Leahy is the author of a book called The Jealousy Cure, and he has a couple of steps to which I've added a little bit that will help us go through this process to resolve jealousy. Firstly, understand that these feelings are normal, they are evolutionary, they're instinctual. As I said earlier on, it is about survival and preservation of relationships. I mustn't judge myself, I mustn't feel shame because I'm feeling jealous. I don't have to feel fear. The second thing that Leahy tells us is, don't sit there and imagine the worst possible things. So much of jealousy and its negative response comes from the imagination. Practice being in the moment. Notice your feelings, but don't react to them. Recognize your thoughts. Notice the bad thoughts and just see them as those are bad thoughts. I don't like them. They're like unwelcome visitors, says Leahy. Don't respond to them. Just realize I have bad thoughts. I don't want them. They're bad things. I'm going to get rid of them. So you're stepping away from them, not reacting to them the whole time. And then thirdly, challenge them. When a bad feeling comes along, challenge that feeling. Ask yourself, where did it come from? What thought led to that feeling? Find the thought. And Leahy says, fact check the thought. It's often false, fake. It's an insecurity, an unsubstantiated belief based on fear. That helps demolish the emotional reaction that comes from it. Be realistic. Is your fear really based on some perfect idea of a relationship that you have, a perfect idea of yourself that you have, or some past belief that's a past relationship? It should be like this. A lot of jealousy is a way of not handling things aren't perfect, because we often don't want to admit that it isn't, or that it's because of ourselves, or because of our partners. And things shouldn't be perfect. Start there. Realize I can always work towards perfection. I shouldn't have perfection to start with. What would I ever work for? Leahy says, number 6, remember that you are responsible for your own behavior, not another person's behavior. So even if someone is cheating on you or lying to you, it's much more about what they are doing than what you are doing. It might be that you're capable of saying, he's cheating on me because I must be ugly, or whatever the case may be. As I said earlier on, another person's mind doesn't have power over you. It's their actions. And their actions, like yours, stem from you, from themselves, in other words. Yours stem from you, theirs stem from themselves. So you're not responsible for another person's actions, thoughts, or feelings, and realize that, therefore, even their bad behavior is about them, not about you. 7thly, importantly, communicate what you feel. Work consciously together to build trust. Sometimes we just take some things for granted and it just doesn't occur to us. So work together to build trust, to reassure, but not from a negative, insecure point of view, but by building trust. There's never really a reason to think that someone else desires what you have, or to think that your partner is engaging in behavior that leads to you feeling jealous. Finally, he says, have compassion for yourself. Whatever your feelings are, you still have a right to them. Even if it's jealousy and fear and insecurity and poor self-esteem, negative emotions like that. Recognize that the feelings of jealousy are rooted in the fear of abandonment, says Leahy. Be compassionate on yourself. Don't judge yourself. Allow that so that you're able to let go of them. If you're compassionate on yourself, you can learn to recognize your feelings as related to unwelcome thoughts. You can track back to what is that thought, fact check that thought, let go of it because it's not true by reminding yourself beliefs take too much energy. Let me concentrate what is true in the here and now. Is it an actual fact? It will help eliminate a lot of that stuff. Don't compare. Don't compare yourself. Don't compare your achievements with someone else's. Stick to your own self, your own path, your own timeline. Stop comparing, and you will be able to have a realistic view of your own self. You are yourself. Don't judge yourself by others. Don't judge yourself by how you imagine they see you. You don't even know. But most importantly, don't judge your own achievements by other people's achievements. Definitely a great root source of jealousy, and a good example of how it's actually got nothing to do with the other people. It's coming from you. And there you have the power of control. We'll close again with the Stoics and our friend Marcus Aurelius, who says, the impediment to action advances action. In other words, what stands in the way becomes the way. Jealousy stands in the way, you will become the jealous one. You become the monster. Stop perceiving the pain you imagine, and you will remain completely unaffected by it. Remember, jealousy is a perception. Stop perceiving the pain you imagine, and you'll remain completely unaffected. And how do you stop? You stop believing. Don't give energy to thoughts for which there is no proof. You are in charge of all the things that cause jealousy. It might seem like a triangle that you're trapped in, but you are the anchor that can change everything in that triangle. We'll be back with more fascinating ideas next week, same time. See you then.